All right, good morning, good afternoon, I guess even good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to today's webinar. My name is Hallie Garner, and I run research and digital content initiatives here at EFT. I'm particularly excited about today's conversation because we're going to be talking about retail today, specifically the impact digitization has on retail. Joining me are going to be Jason Searcy, who's Senior Manager of Digital Supply Chain for Capgemini, as well as Tamir Gottfried, who's GM of Americas for Bring. Obviously, the big omission there is that Renan Cohen is unfortunately not going to be able to join us today. He's been called away on an important customer meeting. But that being said, feel free to submit your questions for Renan to Tamir, and Renan will be provided with everything after the fact, and so can answer anything specifically addressed to him directly via email afterwards. So definitely get those questions through to him. So with that, please do submit your questions. You'll see on the right-hand side there's a dashboard of some type. If you go to the questions tab there, you can enter your questions and we'll address them at the end of the webinar. Secondly, the webinar is going to be recorded. So if you did miss something, if you had to drop out for whatever reason, absolutely not to worry. You'll have that on hand hopefully tomorrow. And with that, and without further delay, I'm going to hand things over first to Jason from Capgemini. Jason?
Yeah, thank you. Good morning and good evening. All right, hopefully should be sharing, so hopefully everyone can see my screen.
Perfect, all good.
All right. Well, first and foremost, thank you for the opportunity to be with you today. It's an exciting era that we're in, for which the pace of technology is changing, along with customer expectations. So thank you for the opportunity for I for Transport and for Bring as well. Today, my goal and objective is to share some observations of what we're seeing in the market. To do just a quick introduction, I'm a senior manager with Capgemini in our digital supply chain practice. I've been in consulting for more than 15 years and have a pretty heavy concentration in the retail sector. So looking forward to showing some insights of things that we're seeing in the market, and hopefully be able to have some healthy dialogue after with lots of questions and open discussion that we'll do at the end of the call. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. You know, I've seen some interesting quotes lately, but I think it's well understood that the pace for which change is happening in the retail space, and especially with technology, is unprecedented. I saw a quote the other day that said the past 20 years have brought more transformation to retail than the 100 before it, and I thought that was impactful, relevant, and it's interesting to see how quickly things are changing. And I'm sure many of you on the call are seeing the same thing. The speed and pervasiveness, are essential to be competitive today. And so hopefully we're going to cover some of those things and dive a bit deeper. I think one of the things that hasn't changed that's interesting is customer centricity and the focus on customer, especially obviously in the retail space. So despite technology changes and the speed at which that changes, the customer loyalty and customer expectations have certainly changed, but the customer centricity hasn't. I think there's always been a focus on customer, but how you reach those customers, how you touch them, how we impact their senses is certainly changing in today's digital era. But the focus on customer centricity is still there. And so these are just some statistics that I wanted to start with that I think are relevant and a good lead into some of the conversation and following slides. But obviously customer loyalty is still really critical. So retaining and keeping customers, much more important than necessarily attracting new customers, although that's still important. Having loyal customers is of utmost importance, even in a digital era. Touches on here too, 84% digital capability. I think one of the things we're going to touch on today is the seamlessness. So, omni-channel in the last 5+ years has been a big buzzword. I think many retailers are now servicing clients through multiple channels, and most retailers have multi-channel or omni-channel capabilities. I think what's becoming more important in the digital era is the ability to seamlessly integrate between those channels and to create a similar experience for customers. So I'm going to touch a bit on that today and dive in a bit deeper, but I think that the focus on omni-channel now is being able to have that seamlessness across channels to create a similar experience. Customer experience, obviously, we've touched on that. Companies are competing on the basis of customer experience and not channel anymore. The mechanism and channel for which customers are serviced, it's more important on the experience and the ability to touch on their senses. And data security is one that's often overlooked. So I put that one here, and we're going to touch on that and talk about this in a bit more detail. But I think when we talk about technology and just the sheer amount of data that retailers have at their fingertips today, data security is one that's not always emphasized or talked about in great detail. So, and I think the importance here in the statistics talks to, I think the consumer perception in some recent surveys that we've done and I've seen is that they have a negative view on privacy incentives. They don't necessarily feel like all retailers do a great job of securing and protecting their data. So we'll talk about that one a bit more, but just some good dialogue to lead in. So why innovate? What are we seeing in the market, and what's going on in this era of digitization that's rapidly changing? Certainly being innovative is critical, and companies and retailers in particular are using that and leveraging that innovation to drive sales. The era of artificial intelligence, I've been seeing and reading a lot about that lately. And AI is here. It's definitely present. It's growing, and that's something that I think we're going to continue to see. And automation is also something, especially in the retail environment, that's continuing to grow and expand. So a couple of references here, but when you think of inventory accuracy, demand planning and forecasting, things like that, I think automation, tools and technologies that are being used to automate and support this innovation are becoming more critical, and you're starting to see that more and more, I think, especially with the consistency that you can get from such tools. One of the things I'm going to focus my time today, so there's this concept of the new status quo versus the pioneers, and the pioneers are the Amazons of the world, the Ubers of the world. And I'm probably going to focus a bit more on the status quo today, just because first and foremost, I think not everybody can be a pioneer or necessarily should strive to be a pioneer. Certainly you want to be competitive, create a competitive advantage, but not everybody necessarily wants to be on the forefront, be an early adopter or first adopter in all instances. But you strive to create the similar customer experience, continue that customer loyalty. So want to differentiate between the two, and I'm probably going to focus a bit more attention on the status quo and the types of digital capabilities and tools that we're seeing with retailers and in the market. So as I mentioned, I'm going to focus a bit on the left-hand side of the slide here. The new status quo trends. I'm going to dive into each of these 5 components in a bit more depth. Again, if you have questions or after, we can talk a bit about the pioneering trends, but just given today's timing, I'm going to focus more on status quo because I think it's more relevant to a broader group of the audience today and in the retail environment. So I'm going to run through each of these and dive in a bit deeper. So what are some of the things we're seeing from a digital component, and what are these things? So one of the things we're seeing is this concept of lifestyle centers. I talked a bit about earlier about the importance of seamlessness across channels, and I think that's definitely very relevant and something that we're seeing. So being able to have a similar experience and touch on customer senses is becoming all more important, despite what channel customers are being serviced through. So Despite the rise in e-commerce, consumers are continuing to frequent physical stores for the experience. So these lifestyle centers are touching on the physical store and the importance of that. So I think there's been ongoing increase in e-commerce and online shopping, but I still think that there's a place and relevance for the storefront. It's just what that looks like and how that feels and how you touch on customer senses is starting to be needs to be different. I think customers expect the experience that they get online is very similar to what they would experience when they go in the store. So having social epicenters or complimentary services, for instance, is becoming more critical. You'll see some retailers are having cafes or coffee shops or even small restaurants. Even things like live entertainment, bringing in entertainment to touch on customer senses and to make it fun, even offering classes. If you think of some examples of companies that do this well, I think of like IKEA or Chanel. If you go to IKEA, it's they change their layout, but IKEA does a good job of having a cafe, making it very inexpensive. Families that come in there can spend the day there shopping, and they've got childcare, and so offering these different complementary services and creating these lifestyle centers are some good examples, I think, of what you're seeing on the storefront. The other thing, that these interactive playgrounds, you hear of gamification all the time. I think being able to do that and interjecting and creating digital components in the storefront, whether it be through interactive touch screens or just presenting iPhones or iPads in the store that customers can go see themselves what's in stock, what's available, if it's not available, when they can get it, I think is becoming more critical. Digital bricks. So, brick and mortar stores were often working hard to compete with online shopping. Physical stores, though, are now, starting to help drive those online sales. So, large percentage of customers actually prefer to shop in the store, and I think that's been a trend that's been ongoing and hasn't changed. So, being able to create some of these experiences and then impact that through these digital bricks are becoming critical. So what does it mean for the digital bricks? There's a couple of things. I think interactive solutions. I touched on this a little bit before, but having digital displays. Now retailers are starting to have interactive screens. You even see this in outdoor shopping malls now, where you can go and touch on a screen and dive in a bit deeper. As to product availability, even if product's not available, how quickly they can get it. I think customers expect same-day delivery in most cases today. But doing that through tablets, mobile devices, but having these interactive solutions is critical. Another concept that you've probably seen, or many of you are doing, or retailers are doing, is this idea of proximity advantage. So, having beacons in the store through your customers, which can send out alerts and messages through digital devices to alert them on sales, things that are going on. But lots of tools and providers out there doing these kind of things, and I think it can be really impactful to reach out based on geofencing and proximity of your customers to send out promotions, specials, anything to continue to try to drive that traffic to the store. And then obviously social media is a big component today. It's inevitable that everybody has to be doing something social through all the different social platforms, and I think that's just a necessary component to continue to promote your brand and drive traffic in store and through whichever channel you may be focused on. Some examples of retailers that may be doing this are Carrefour or Frank and Orr, which you may have heard of. Do a good job of doing this, integrating digital, also using social components to promote and generate traffic. I'm going to move on to delivery innovation now. And this one's critical. I think delivery obviously has changed drastically with customer expectations, just for the sheer nature of how quickly customers are expecting things to be delivered. And even in the storefront, I think, as I mentioned, I think customers now, come in, and if something isn't in stock, they still expect the capability of having something be delivered same day, or to have personalized distribution where they can shop in the store but have the delivery done same day or next day at latest. Um, the other things with delivery innovation are, this concept of predictive analytics or predictive supply chain. It's the amount of data that retailers have at their fingertips is just uh, enormous compared to what we saw 5 or even 10 years ago. Terabytes and terabytes of data at your fingertips. And I think what retailers are having to do is figure out what they do with that data and how they use it. So this concept of predictive analytics, being able to analyze consumer behaviors and enable customer, still focus on that customer centricity is critical. So, making use and sense of this data and being able to use it is critical with just the sheer amount of data that customers and retailers have at their fingertips. Um, I also touched on as far as delivery innovation, omni-channel accessibility. Most retailers and consumers are using multiple means of different channels for which they shop or they interact. Making that a seamless experience across channels, I think, is what's more important now. Creating a similar experience in store that they experience online, like I said, by touching at customers' senses. So I think that's something that's becoming more and more critical as we think about delivery innovation. Um, if we think about the folks that are doing this well, obviously the Walmarts of the world, DHL, this idea of Amazon Dash, being able to click a button and automatically reorder for replenishment, and Instacart. So those are just some examples of those that I think are leveraging some of the things that I touched on from a delivery innovation perspective. Um, Brand advocates, what are the things that are happening here? I think, loyalty goes beyond incentives for rewards now. I think, customers expect that, but the means for which you do that are changing. So loyalty and rewards programs are still critical, but how you interact with those customers and the means for which you do that are now changing. How are they doing those things? How can leverage these things? Things like gamification, that's been a big concept in the last several years. I think, especially if you think about social interactions. I think gamification has become really critical. In fact, I was in a Moe's the other day with my kids, and was using our loyalty program through the application, and they had made it fun. There was live music you could click on, and it just really made it interactive and tried to keep your attention. I think this concept of gamification for loyalty rewards programs, especially if you think of social channels, is becoming more critical, making it fun, engaging customers, keeping their attention, encouraging them to use different apps and programs. Some of the ways that we're doing that, seeing that for brand advocates. Another component is social influence. Obviously, um, using social influences to explain the values and benefits across social networks. It's just a necessary component to use social media these days. So, and I think most have been doing that for some time. But making that seamless and using these different social influences through gamification and these different mechanisms are really critical. Who are some of the folks that are doing that? iStock, Sephora, lots of them out there, but those are just a couple of examples. I think those that do a good job of that. And the last one, I mentioned this early on, but data guardrails. There's been a lot of studies and statistics in this area, and I think the most telling statistic is that in general, more than 90% of consumers' sentiment is negative when it comes to retailers' privacy initiatives. So I think their perception is that their data isn't necessarily protected, even though that might not be the case. I think retailers, in some instances, are doing these things, but they're just not necessarily widely communicated. And it's not oftentimes until there's a breach or an issue that the press comes out or people start to read about this. So I think customer expectations are obviously incredibly high in this area, protecting their data, sensitive information. Um, PCI compliance, things like that through your point of sale systems is really critical. So what are the things, obviously cybersecurity, data encryption are really critical. Data retention, I think just for the sheer amount of data now, retailers have to consider how much data is retained, where it's retained, different failovers and backups and mechanisms to keep that data safe are becoming more critical. Data parallelism, so making security part of the company culture. I think just like I said, using different communication mechanisms and letting it be known through social platforms or whatever that data privacy and security and cybersecurity is a critical part of your culture is becoming more and more important. Fraud prevention mechanisms. So getting ahead of the curve and promoting and letting consumers know that this is a part of the company culture, I think is critical to get ahead of those things and let customers know that you have these preventative measures in place before a breach has been a breach has occurred. If I think of some of the more recent that some of you may have read, both Costco and Target, I think had pretty significant breaches, and that type of obviously that type of publicity can be negative, and the measures of which they had to go about correcting those things is critical. So I think getting ahead of those and taking advantage of those are really critical. So given our time today, I obviously wasn't able to touch on everything, but I think hopefully this has given you a feel for this era of digitization and the things that are going on in the market, the types of tools and capabilities that consumers are using and retailers are using to continue to emphasize this focus on customer centricity and obviously promote brand loyalty. So with that, I'm going to pause there and transition over to Tamir Godfrey from Bring to focus more on kind of a bit more on the technology side. But again, I appreciate everyone's time today, and thank you for the opportunity to be with you.
Thank you so much, Jason. And as Jason mentioned in his presentation, if you want him to elaborate on anything further at the end of the webinar, do jump in with a quick question. We can address that absolutely at the end. Obviously, a lot of material covered there, so yeah, jump in, get involved with the questions there. And on that note, I'm going to hand things over to Tamir. Tamir?
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Can we see my screen? Just make sure.
Yes, perfect.
Great. So thanks for attending this webinar. My name is Tamir Gottfried. I'm the General Manager for the Americas in Bring. For those of you who might not be familiar with Bring, we're an established technology company providing enterprises with an end-to-end customer-centric logistics platform. We don't provide drivers, but rather we provide the technology that enables organizations to manage those last mile logistics. And that spans across all industries, whether it's food delivery or parcel delivery to healthcare services and more. So in my section in this webinar, I want to focus on the technology that on customer expectations of the technology and what enterprises need to do in order to meet those new customer demands. With that being said, let's take a look at what is actually driving those customers' expectations. In the past, customers were very happy to just visit the store or consult friends and make purchasing decisions. And eventually, after they select the product at the store, they would make a delivery decision, right? And then and come to some arrangement on how they'll get the products to their house if they cannot carry them out with them. Well, that drastically changed over the years, where now customers rely more on technology. Customers are mostly staying at home, researching for information online and making those purchasing decisions. Or as Jason stated, a lot of the customers do go to the store. Stores have not become irrelevant. And they do go to the stores, but at the store they experience now a new technology and the new digital stores, right? And so even at those points, the customers are provided with a lot of choices when it comes to their deliveries. Again, packages that either they sit and order from home or they make those decisions at the store to have them shipped to their house. And this can be packages or services. So when that's done, when that decision is made, and the customer has selected on how they like those products or services delivered, they enter a new frontier, a frontier that a lot of enterprises see as challenging today, because that customer experience doesn't end with the customer just leaving the store after they make the decision, but rather that experience now extends to how their order is being managed up until the point where they receive the goods at their doorstep. And so it became a very eminent for enterprises to provide customers with a frictionless opportunity and a frictionless technology that will enable them to feel empowered, to be part of the experience, to receive visibility into the operations, to be able to know in real time what's happening with the products that they just purchased. And really the two players that changed that game were Amazon and Uber, right? So when Amazon came into play, they start offering different delivery choices. You can have the product within a few days and not have to pay for it, or if you're a member, you can get it within a couple of days, or maybe even a couple of hours these days. And they're talking to make that even faster. So that really provided customers with a new realization that they can get their goods and services really, really fast and really, really cheap. Now, on the other side, we have Uber. And Uber really came to market and enabled the customers to take an active participation in that experience, to know exactly in real time where their driver is, where their packages are, to know in real time and be able to communicate in real time with the person that's going to deliver those services for them. So they really brought in a new standard for what customers anticipate now from their service providers. And as Jason said, digital transformation. All that magic is done through technology. And today, enterprises must invest in technology if they want to remain relevant. Right? Technology that allows them to keep that flexibility, to adapt to new services, to adapt to new customer demands, and really meet new customer expectations. And the magic is really connecting the customers to your supply chain end to end. And to do that, there are basically three key factors that enterprises need to meet in order to remain competitive or to create some competitive advantage. And we talked about real-time visibility, knowing where my product is at any time or where my service provider is at any time, being able to communicate directly with that person that's delivering that services for me or delivering that product for me. And if not with that person, it's being able to communicate in real time with my call center, the call center of the enterprise whom I bought the products from. And then enabling that enterprise to really have visibility in real time onto where that product is at throughout that supply chain. And then finally, we need to have technology that enables operational efficiency. We need to have a technology that would allow us to move and shift with these moving demands. And that being said, we really see that enterprises need to achieve logistical excellence. And what does that mean, achieving logistical excellence? Well, on one hand, we're all talking about the optimal user experience, the perfect experience for the entire ecosystem, right? It's providing a delightful service to our customers, providing really an end-to-end unified brand experience, and that is critical. And that brand experience doesn't necessarily mean just the customers ordering the product directly from their supplier and their provider and seeing their brand and feeling exactly the culture that brand stands behind. But rather, we need to extend that experience to anybody who partners with us to deliver those services and the product. Right? So suddenly, when you're not in control of that last mile and you put it in the hands of one of your partners, you want to ensure that partner, or more so, that the customer receives the same level of service and the same branding as you invest in your own brand. Now, that being said, it's not something that's very trivial. It's something that's very elaborate. It's something that truly takes you a step beyond and puts you in the control of what's happening with your deliveries. Meaning, if a service provider is not acting according to your norm, you want to know about it, and you want to know about it in real time. And that's where the customer communication takes place. If they're not satisfied You need to know about it so you can take corrective action immediately. And if it's your own delivery person or it's the delivery person of a third party, it doesn't matter. You still need to be aware of what's happening and take corrective action. And on the other side of this, we see the operational efficiency. Without operational efficiency, there's no way to achieve an optimal experience. And the operational efficiency spans across, again, your entire supply chain. It's being able to provide operations that are easily scalable, that enable that real-time visibility into your customers or other resources within your organization who provide those customer communications. You need to have an optimized and cost-effective performance in order to achieve that, in order to achieve multiple levels or elastic logistics, basically letting either a crowdsource or your own fleet or a 3PL manage your deliveries. You really need to do that in the best cost-effective manner. And so when you achieve operational efficiency, you ultimately can achieve optimal experience and thereby become bring logistical excellence to your organization. And essentially, any enterprise with goods or services that deliver to consumers, to end users, and want to remain relevant, they must match Amazon's logistical capabilities within the next few years. Because believe it or not, this is the new standard, and that standard is going to change as time comes. And you need to make sure that your systems, your tools, your design for your supply chain is all aligned and all flexible enough to adapt rapidly to these moving changes. And with that, let me, I guess, open up the webinar to questions.
Perfect. Tamir, thank you so much for that. Yes, and as Tamir said, we're going to launch straight into Q&A, so keep your questions coming through. But with that, I'm going to jump straight in with a first question here, actually. And it's going to be, I guess it speaks to what you guys are doing quite a bit, Bring, but I wanted to hear, where do you think we'll be in a year or two in terms of customer expectations when it comes to delivery? Tamir, can you jump on that one first?
Sure, great question. Thank you. So, as I mentioned in the presentation, today we already see the norm for next day deliveries or 2-day deliveries. And we see that now being pushed to the next 2 hours, or even some are talking in the next 15 minutes. So we see that becoming the new standard as perhaps not same day, but next day, and perhaps even a few hours for certain products or services. But what's most important is that in a year or two from now, enterprises really need to have that flexibility to adapt to the new modalities, to adapt to the new demands from customers. And let's face it, there's going to be somebody else who's going to challenge our norm and provide a different type of experience who we might not have visibility to today. But we ensure that our systems, our platforms, and our supply chain is designed so that it can accommodate those rapid changes in the expectations.
Jason, did you want to jump in as well? And did you have any comments on sort of what we're going to see in a year or two in terms of customer expectations, especially with regards to delivery?
I mean, I think Tamir covered it well. I think to his point, once a customer has experienced that same-day delivery or even having something within a few hours, that kind of sets the baseline for their expectations. So, if you're not willing to be a disruptor and offer that service, in some cases, if you're capable, I think somebody will. So, no, I think he stated it well, and we're in an age of where speed and pervasiveness are essential to remain competitive. So, yeah, I think we're going to continue to see more and more, especially in the retail space, more and more people offer an Amazon-like experience, if they're not already doing so, to deliver things same day or even, to Tamir's point, within a few hours. But other than that, nothing else to add.
Perfect. Well, that's actually a great jumping off point for the next question I've been given here. And that is basically that, I mean, no one has the deep pockets that Amazon has in terms of competing head to head. So what are your thoughts then in terms of innovating around that? What can, I guess, smaller up and coming competitors do basically to compete head to head with Amazon without those sort of incredible overheads that Amazon's taking on board?
Yeah, I'll make a couple of comments first and then let Tamir jump in. But I think you made a really great point in that not everybody has the capital or infrastructure that Amazon does, and in many cases may not even want to be competitive in that nature. Amazon spent a number of years, not profitable, so to speak, because of the investment in infrastructure. So I think a couple of things. One of the things you can do is this concept of a partnership model. So I think retailers can look to this partnership model of people that do have the infrastructure or delivery means and capabilities, technologies like Bring, that can give people at their fingertips the capability to have the visibility and transparency end to end across the supply chain. So I think look into a partnership model if you're not looking to make the investment and have the capital to do so. Looking at people that do have the infrastructure or technology or capabilities and partner with them potentially to still bring those capabilities to your customers. So
Perfect. Tamir, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, so Jason covered it pretty well. I would just add that in addition to the infrastructure that Amazon put in place, they put hundreds of years, probably many years, into developing their technology. This is something that enterprises who don't have that in their DNA, who don't have a technology and building designing software or developing software in their DNA, they're not going to be able to match it. But there are platforms out there such as Bring that can enable them to rapidly come to market with a technology that's comparable to what's being offered right now by Amazon, or perhaps even in some cases more advanced than Amazon and Uber. And so looking into deploying such technologies could be a fairly economical solution for competing with the type of services that Amazon is offering. And lucky for the enterprises today, there are vendors out there that can satisfy that need, and so they can continue focusing on their business, which is to sell and serve to sell products and service their customers, and then let the companies that focus on building technologies handle that part for them.
Great. So I've got some questions coming in that are, I guess, somewhat in a similar light, but on a sort of different angle, basically, which is pointing out the fact that a lot of retailers, are stuck with a lot of the legacy systems that they've implemented over the last several years. So based on that, how can companies that have those sort of legacy systems maybe holding them back, how can they sort of adapt and change at short notice to compete in this fast-paced market nowadays? Maybe back over to Jason.
yeah, sure. I'll touch on that one first, and it's a great question, and it's a tough thing to tackle. I think it's definitely consistent with what I see in the market. I do a lot of work in the retail space, and you're right. A lot of these legacy systems are still in place because in many cases they're very effective. Not only do employees and retailers get accustomed to using those systems, but oftentimes they're relatively effective at doing so. I think a couple of things. The concept of the cloud has been well established and is well underway, and I think what that has done, though, is enabled retailers or companies that are on legacy environments to consider an option that is less technology evasive, meaning you don't have to have the infrastructure and the IT support to necessarily leverage some of those systems. So I think you're seeing a lot of companies with legacy applications look to unfortunately downsizing certain IT departments or groups and migrating to the cloud where they're using an application being hosted by another provider. So the benefit there, I think, is that it's matured quite a bit. Cloud migration and moving to the cloud now has been well established and has matured to the point where I think the speed at which companies can move to a new system and platform outside of the training and the change management component that comes with that. But I think the speed at which they can do that has become much quicker from your conventional system implementation, which probably took 8 months to a year to move from a legacy application to a different off-the-shelf provider. So yeah, I think the cloud is one example, and there's lots of ways of doing that in a speedy and in quick manner to see the speed to value. I think speed to market and speed to value are becoming more critical, especially with any sort of IT investments. Um,
Great. And Tamir, what about from your side? How is Bring at in terms of working with retailers that are working with a sort of legacy framework?
Yeah, I love that question. We come across it very often, and frankly, I'm a little biased in my response. Yeah, but we see the issue with legacy systems, and legacy could be something that maybe the company invested in from a third party provider a while ago, or it could be something that was built in house. Where the latter one is maybe a little more challenging as there is emotional attachment to that system as well. But one thing for sure, if they had a system built in house or even a legacy system, one of two or two things might have happened. If it's a legacy system, then eventually their business would have probably grown and evolved around the capabilities of that system and the limitations of that system. And if it's an in-house system that's designed, it was most likely designed for a particular need at a particular time, and evolving that system is very, very challenging, not to mention the dependency on the resources that actually designed that system in the first place. So we see those as some of the reasons why companies do want to change, and obviously they want to change to adapt to new norms, new technologies that are available, more efficient, maybe even cheaper to maintain. And so, when we approach customers that have those needs, we provide different options. Obviously, the more painful one is to rip out the old system and put in the new one. But there are very few companies that will take on that challenge, right? Most of them will start slowly. So we enable with our technology to just enhance the functionality that needs to change or add additional new functionality on top of the current infrastructure that's in place. So essentially, it's enhancing the infrastructure that's in place with the new services or the modified services that want to be provided, or connecting to additional functionality or modules that might be interesting for the business, and slowly moving them off of that legacy system and onto this latest and greatest technology that's available. So again, it's done in stages. It's usually not let's rip one out, put the new one in, but rather we provide this layering approach to start enhancing that capability and functionality. And let's not forget, sometimes these legacy systems might be there for a very, very long time. So you want to kind of offer this facelift to that system, but not necessarily replace it in its entirety.
Perfect. I've just gotten in the trillion-dollar question, which I've got to ask basically, and that is that. So Amazon is investing in physical stores. They're developing their own food labels, and it's really where's Amazon headed? What is the strategy for the next 10 years? Well, I'm going to throw that one back at Jason actually to start out with, but sort of as I said, the trillion-dollar question that the industry is kind of looking at. What's Amazon's next move really?
Yeah, no, it's certainly the $1 trillion question. It's a good one. I think everybody probably has now seen the news of their recent acquisition of Whole Foods, and it's an interesting one and a strategic one. But I think it speaks to kind of the direction they're going. I think Whole Foods is an interesting one because I do think that they've got quite a few stores strategically located, and I think with Amazon's current infrastructure, being able to see what they do with that business, I can't, obviously predict exactly what they'll do, but I think some can forecast, they're going to start to be able to do, some of what they're doing with Amazon Fresh and whatnot with delivery and pickups. I think it's going to be interesting to see what they're doing with that storefront. So I think they certainly have the infrastructure, and then now with the sheer number of stores and that Whole Foods has. I think it's going to be interesting to see what they do. I do think there's other competitors though that hopefully will make them. I'm hoping with Amazon's infrastructure, they make them more price competitive. I know I shop at Whole Foods, but probably the biggest deterrent is that it's quite expensive. And with places like Trader Joe and Sprouts and those sorts of things that offer similar organic options and whatnot at a more price competitive price point, I think it's going to naturally push them with Amazon's infrastructure to be to consider having a Whole Foods be in a more price competitive component. But artificial intelligence is here. We talked about all these things. I mean, there's crazy concepts and things that Amazon's doing. The drone delivery concept's been out there. If they can get past the regulations, I do think in the next 5 years that's something that we'll start to see trials and component. Already some of those things are happening, but I think actually in a consumer environment and on a small scale regional test market, I think we'll start to see some of those kinds of concepts. I don't know that we'll see floating warehouses necessarily in space in the next 5 years, but I think those concepts and the artificial intelligence component is here. This idea of this virtualization is real, and I do think that Amazon is well positioned, and clearly, Bezos is with SpaceX and all the different things that they're doing. I think they're certainly innovative and going to continue to be on the cusp of that. So hopefully, I didn't completely avoid that, but it is a very good question. But that's my perspective. I'll let Tamir shed some light as well.
Yeah. So
Cheers.
thanks. So I think another part where we're seeing Amazon venture into it, and again, of course, they're all about diversifying their business and getting into everything, right? But I think we've seen recently them going into also the service industry as well. They're talking about now pretty much competing with the Geek Squad, right? And then going into that arena as well. We're seeing them going into healthcare. And so I think all these services will really shape and change their offering. I think their offering is going to become much more customized to the individual consumers, especially with information that they're getting from the IoT and the AI that's being worked on at Amazon. I can definitely see that shaping the future of how they deliver and provide services.
Perfect. No, that's really interesting insight into them, and I suppose we'll just have to wait and see for the answer to that trillion-dollar question. It seems like every week there's something new coming out from them, and it's always exciting. Listen, we're quickly approaching the top of the hour here, so I'm going to end with one last question here. But that being said, for the audience there, I would like to still encourage you to keep asking your questions now. As I said, we'll take all of these down, and we'll be able to answer them after the fact through email and things like that. So if you did have any nagging questions, feel free to get them in that way. But I was going to ask one last question here, and it's going to be, I guess, a little bit sort of forward-looking, and it's really, what's the next innovation that's going to transform retail? Jason, do you want to have a go at that?
Yeah, I sure, absolutely. I think honestly, some of the concepts that I talked about today with the 5 different components that I touched on, I think some of those things are already being done, but we're going to continue to see seamlessness between channels. I think the storefront is changing, but it's always going to have a place. I think Tamir touched on this as well, but I think customers still want to go to a store where they can touch and feel a product, but how they interact and how quickly they can get product in the event that it's not available in the store. Obviously the Amazons of the world have changed that and transformed that. So I think that's going to continue. I think that there's been some early adopters of that, but this concept of lifestyle centers and things I talked about, I think really touching on customer senses, every different sense, taste, touch, smell, sight, is critical. So the experience that they get when they go in the store, whether it's through live entertainment or offering complimentary services, through cafes or restaurants or whatever it may be, I think really keeping their attention and creating a good experience is going to be critical when you think about the storefront. So I didn't jump into some of the stuff from a Pioneer perspective, but and I'm sure I'll get some follow-up questions. But lots of things going on there from a collaboration creation, type of thing. I think, if you think of Coca-Cola many years ago, their freestyle machines, that was one example of what they did to allow and create innovation and put it in the fingertips of their customers. The freestyle machines are the machines, as you probably know, you go in and you can kind of create, I don't know, 100 different flavors of drinks by mixing and matching different things. Lego. I've got relatively young kids, and my kids are into Lego, so Lego comes to mind. But Lego launched this ideas website, which allows people to go and vote and provide feedback on new projects and designs. And so I think that one of the things we'll see is that retailers and consumers can start to put that innovation in the hands of their customers to help them drive what they want, what they need. Because it's hard to this predictive analytics concept, it's hard to get ahead of exactly what customers want, because their needs and their wants change constantly. What you want today might be different than what you want tomorrow or a week or a month down the road. So I think allowing to do things and put things at the fingertips of your consumers to help drive that innovation is really, really critical. So those are a few examples, and certainly I love talking about this stuff and would dive in more. But I think those are a couple of ideas that and things that you'll see in the market is the IoT and AI and those kind of concepts continue to evolve.
Perfect. And Tamir, over to you. Any thoughts on that next technology or innovation really that's going to transform retail? Maybe it's on the last mile side.
Sure. So I think the innovation comes in the sense of more democratizing the deliveries, if we may say. Today we see that drivers are becoming a scarce commodity. Everybody is fighting for drivers nowadays. So more innovation is going to come in that sense. Now, having said that, I'm not sure if over the next couple of years we'll see bots driving down down the street and making those deliveries as right now are being tested. But we're definitely going to see a greater need for innovation on how we make decisions and who is best suited to make those last mile deliveries, and especially when we start looking at the IoT and the Alexa and Siri and then OK Google and all these different tools that are now in everyone's homes, and that's definitely also going to impact on how retailers are going to have to start providing services and delivering our goods.
All right. Well, listen, that's about all the time we have for you guys today. As I mentioned, we will be sending out recordings tomorrow at some stage, but I wanted to thank both Tamir and Jason for sharing their thoughts today on digitization on retail, and I'd like to thank you all for joining us as well to the webinar today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you as well.